A senior Trump official told Bloomberg that the U.S. is working with Tokyo to end the mistaken stacking of tariffs in Donald Trump's original executive order issued on July 1st. This stacking, explained below, resulted in higher tariffs on a myriad of Japan's exports than had been agreed to during the negotiations. Bloomberg reported that a forthcoming announcement could take the form of a joint statement. Last night, Japan's chief trade negotiator, Ryosei Akazawa, stated it was simply a regrettable error that caused Donald Trump's executive order to impose higher-than-negotiated tariffs on Japan. He added that the U.S. promised to issue a new executive order correcting the error and to compensate any importers who were mistakenly overcharged. The higher tariffs will remain in place until Donald Trump issues a new executive order, but it's not clear how long that will take. When Akazawa was asked, Kyoto reported that he replied that it was up to the U.S., but it is impossible to go 6 months or a year without making any corrections. Therefore, I understand that they will respond within the bounds of common sense. I, as well as some Japanese contacts, wondered why Akazawa talked of months instead of weeks, since it's simply a matter of changing some language. However, informed sources say that Tokyo expects a new executive order within a few weeks. Akazawa also noted that, when the new executive order is issued, it will be accompanied by another one lowering the tariff on autos and auto parts from the current 27.5% to 15%. Nonetheless, given the capriciousness and chaos of the Trump administration, no one really knows for sure. My gut feeling is that Akazawa's version of events is probably correct, that in its haste and incompetence, the administration made an error that it will eventually correct. The mistaken executive order seems like a product of incompetence rather than malevolence. However, given that Trump is Trump, it's not possible to breathe easy until the corrected executive order is actually issued. Distrust abounds because, as Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba explained to anxious members of the Diet, the other party, Trump, is not a normal person. What was the error? Tokyo and the EU had each secured a promise that they would get special treatment on Trump's reciprocal tariffs. That is, they would be subject to a maximum tariff of 15% on virtually all items. Tariffs below 15% would be raised to 15%. Tariffs that were above 15% before Trump took office would go no higher. When Trump issued his official executive order on July 31st, he kept his promise to the EU, but not to Japan. When it comes to Japan and every other nation outside the EU, the executive order says that 15% is applied in addition to existing tariffs, a procedure called stacking. For example, Japan's beef exports to the United States are subject to a 26.4% most favored nation (MFN) tariff that applies to almost all U.S. trade partners. Instead of staying at 26.4%, as promised, the tariff has been increased to 41.4% due to the 15% stacking. Regarding textiles, the tariff has been lifted from 7.5% to 22.5%, rather than the promised 15%. Most manufactured goods have an MFN tariff of around 3.3%, and those have gone to 18.3% instead of 15%. These higher tariffs will remain in effect until a new executive order is issued. Fortunately, this stacking only exerts a substantial impact on a small fraction of Japan's exports. However, some of these occur in politically sensitive sectors, like farm goods. Consequences. Even if the wrong executive order was a simple mistake, delay, distrust, and uncertainty could have serious economic consequences until the corrected executive order is issued. How will U.S. importing companies respond to the higher tariffs? Will they believe they'll be compensated, and can they afford to wait? Or will they import less from Japan until the new order is published? Sometimes, uncertainty can cause more damage than bad news that is certain. Moreover, each day of delay has personal consequences for Ishiba, who is fighting for his political life with other parties, as well as opponents within his own party. They are demanding that he step down after losing the ruling party's majority in both houses of Japan's Diet. The longer it takes the U.S. to confirm Ishiba's promise of no discrepancy between the U.S. and Japan on the terms of the trade deal, the more opponents will claim he has mishandled the issue. Sectoral tariffs. All of the above refers only to the so-called reciprocal tariffs. In this case, Trump is calling America's trade deficit a national emergency under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, (EPA), and imposing across-the-board tariffs on almost all products exported by each country. This use of the IEEPA is being disputed in court. There is a separate group of sectoral tariffs on a few other products, including autos and auto parts, steel, and aluminum, with forthcoming ones on semiconductors and pharmaceuticals, and perhaps more to come. These are being justified by a separate law, the national security provision of U.S. trade law called Section 232. Trump is arguing that over-reliance on imports of these products poses a threat to national security. Akazawa also reportedly discussed these products. On Wednesday and Thursday, Akazawa spent a total of 4.5 hours with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and an additional half-hour with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Sources indicate that only a small portion of this time was devoted to correcting the error regarding reciprocal tariffs. Most was devoted to other issues. For example, Akazawa again pressed Washington to issue an executive order as soon as possible to lower the auto tariffs from 27.5% to 15%, as agreed upon. This is vital to Japan, since vehicles and auto parts account for approximately 1/3 of all Japanese exports to the U.S. Every day of delay costs the automakers more money. Nikkei reported, 7 major Japanese automakers lose an estimated 3 billion yen, $20.3 million, in combined profits each day that the U.S. delays lowering auto tariffs, with concerns about demand discouraging them from passing on the cost to customers. For more on this, see my previous post. Another issue is the promise of special treatment of Japan, as well as the EU, on upcoming sectoral tariffs on semiconductors and pharmaceuticals. Tokyo believes it has been promised that no matter how high those tariffs may be, and Trump is talking about 100% for computer chips, the tariff on Japan will only be 15%. For other countries, the 15% sectoral tariff on cars and auto parts will be added to the existing MFN tariff of 2.5%, resulting in a total of 17.5%. Similarly, for most countries, but not Japan and the EU, the 15% sectoral tariff on light trucks, e.g., SUVs, would be added to the current MFN tariff of 25%, bringing the total to a prohibitive 40%. Akazawa may have sought assurance on all these issues, as well as quick action on a formal executive order to bring the sectoral tariff down from the current 25%. Without a written agreement between Japan and the U.S., no promise or claim of mutual understanding is secure until it appears in an executive order. Japan's ire index rising. The Japanese government is increasingly irate over what it believes are breaches of contract by